Property Part 2. Property is impossible. In this video I will bring the arguments why property is impossible by Proudhon and try to explain them in a way that's easier to understand than a book from the 1800s. If you want to read the book yourself, you can find a link in the description, but take note that it's an old book, so some information in it is sure to be outdated today. Also, it's a good idea to watch my other video first, because it's there I define property and its history. Part 2. The idea of having property at all is the idea that you can have something out of nothing. Property is an oxymoron in this sense. If someone pays farm rent for farmland from someone who only has the right of land because forefathers had conquered it, or because someone in the end purchased it from conquerors, this means that this property is basically laundered or the receiving of stolen goods. When you have a shop and pay rent, most of the costs of running the shop are usually not the products themselves. It's also not the costs of making the commodities or food. It is rent or mortgage. Basically, if you trace it back, the right of ownership of the land comes from nothing. The ones who built the building you rent do not get any of the profits from it. Basically, the ones who make the money are the people with the stupid piece of paper. There is no logic to having parasitic landlords. They are of no use to society, and their passive income is more of a hindrance to growth and innovation. A hindrance is when something is an obstacle or stands in the way. Part 3. Property is impossible because wherever it exists, the cost of production costs more than it's actually worth. When you have to pay rent or a mortgage to use a shop or a workshop or a field, then you have to sell your products for a way higher price to be able to pay for the rent or mortgage. This is even exacerbated with taxes, so if you're lucky that you have to only pay 10% taxes and you have to pay rent, then to be able to make everything even, to make it worth for yourself, you have to raise prices way higher than the product is actually worth. This means that a large portion of the profit of the actual product you make or sell goes directly to the owner. This is inefficient and is yet another example of how ownership is parasitic. Part 4. Property is impossible because with a given capital, production is proportional to labor, not to property. No matter how much money you have, it doesn't produce anything. No matter how many stocks you have or digital properties you own, it doesn't produce anything at all. Today, I would add means of production and labor to what production is proportional to, since we have this thing called automation and machinery these days. Part 5. Property is impossible because it's homicide. With property, most people who have small businesses have to pay rent or pay a mortgage. A fun side note is that the word mort in French means death, and gage, or gage, I'm not good at French, means pledge. So mortgage, roughly translated from French, means death pledge. Very spooky. Anyway, most people also rent homes or pay mortgages. This means that for most of our lives we work to pay rent or pay debt until we either die, and when we die we have accumulated nothing unless we have been exploiting others. If you decide to take a mortgage, as stated before, most people will sell it off later on as some sort of pension fund and start renting afterwards. But then, when you sell it, you want the same amount of money as you paid for it, since you otherwise would have a loss, and then still have to pay the rest of the loan with interest. Some sell the home with the loan, and this is quite common. This means every time a home is sold, the price has to rise way above the cost of producing the home, and that causes housing bubbles. Then, when people can't afford to take the mortgages for the houses, there's a crisis. This means starvation and death in societies with no form of social security. Property is also homicide when we see drafts, which happens during some war times. According to Proudhon, the soldiers' morale is comparable to how much they hate their uniforms. So to explain that, this means that the morale of the soldier is better or worse according to their conditions, if they are better or worse off than what they're used to. Note that there's a big difference between drafted soldiers, volunteers and soldiers of necessity. Some people enlist because they have no other way of sustaining themselves. Some enlist because they have better opportunities as soldiers to improve their standards of living. So I noticed that in my last video I didn't render it properly and some pictures didn't go quite well, but I think I'll fix it in this one. Maybe I'll fix the other one later. I don't know. I have plenty of things I want to make, and yeah, I have plenty of other parts of why property is impossible, and I'll upload it as soon as I can. And yeah, so I'll upload it as soon as it's done. Basically, recording takes less time than the actual video, so I'll see what I can do to do it a bit faster. Yeah. If you want to, it would be nice if you would like to share it or give some feedback. That would be nice. And yeah, if you click the subscribe button, then it will show up in your feed when I make my next video. You don't have to, but if you would like to see the other parts, then please do so. And yeah, have a nice day and things.